South Korean martial law lifted. High Court upholds death sentence for Vietnamese tycoon. Salam Malaysia, Madani. You're watching World Today with me, Renee Fong. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol abandoned a short-lived attempt at martial law on Wednesday after lawmakers defied security forces to vote against his declaration and thousands of protesters took to the streets. Yoon's shock bid to impose South Korea's first martial law in over 4 decades plunged the country into its deepest turmoil in its modern democratic history. The dramatic development left the future of Yoon, a conservative politician and former star public prosecutor who was elected president in 2022, in jeopardy. South Korea's main opposition party, whose lawmakers jumped fences and tussled with security forces so they could vote to overturn the law, demanded Yoon to step down immediately over the attempted insurrection. The nation's largest umbrella labor union also called an indefinite general strike until Yoon resigned, and the leader of Yoon's own ruling party even described the attempt as tragic while calling for those involved to be held accountable. Yoon backed down after lawmakers voted to oppose the declaration, which he made late on Tuesday night, citing the threat of North Korea and anti-state forces. South Korean citizens expressed concern after their president Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law on Tuesday night to thwart anti-state forces among his opponents. Seoul President Park Geun-woo said that the martial law declaration didn't make sense.
이게 말이 되나? 제가 알기로는 그때 광주 민주화 운동 이후인가? 그때 하고서는 처음 있는 일인 것 같은데 21세기에 이게 맞나 싶어서 왔습니다.
Yo Young-ju said she initially thought the declaration was a joke, but became worried when she found out it was true.
자려고 이렇게 누웠다가 이게 유튜브 보는데 갑자기 소식이 있더라고요. 그래가지고 거짓말인가 그랬는데, 그래서 여러분들 막 들어보니까 진짜 계엄령을 선포한 거예요. 그래가지고 너무 걱정이 돼서.
A court in Vietnam on Tuesday upheld a death sentence for real estate tycoon Trong My Lan after rejecting her appeal against a conviction for embezzlement and bribery in a high-profile $12 billion fraud case. Lan, the chairwoman of real estate developer Van Tin Pat Holdings Group, was sentenced to death in April for her role in what was Vietnam's biggest financial fraud case on record. The High People's Court in southern Ho Chi Minh City determined there was no basis to reduce Lan's death sentence. She is one of the most famous business executives and state officials jailed in the communist country's lengthy anti-graft campaign known as Blazing Furnace. The prosecution said consequences that Lan caused are unprecedented in the history of litigation, and the amount of money embezzled is unprecedentedly large and unrecoverable. Lan's arrest in 2022 sparked a run on one of the country's largest private banks by deposits, Saigon Joint Stock Commercial Bank, SCB, which was at the center of the fraud and largely owned by Lan through her proxies. Apart from the death sentence, Lan was handed a life sentence at a separate trial in October after being found guilty of obtaining property by fraud, money laundering, and illegal cross-border money transfers. 6 people were killed while several others were wounded in an Israeli air attack on Al-Falah School, a shelter for displaced families in Gaza City's Zaytoun suburb. Civil defense rescuers were present at the scene as they were searching through the rubble inside the classrooms following the sudden attack. Witnesses said people were sitting in their places waiting for lunch and the strike came suddenly. There was no one in this place at all except children and women, which were pulled out from under the rubble by civil defense personnel. Palestinian medics said Israeli military strikes killed at least 23 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip on Tuesday, most of them in the town of Beit Lahia on the northern edge, as the army issued new evacuation orders in the south of the small enclave. The army says it is targeting regrouping Hamas-led freedom fighters who often use civilian buildings, including schools and hospitals, for operational cover. Hamas denies this and instead accused Israeli forces of indiscriminate bombardments. Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani called for peace and prosperity during his visit to Westminster in London on Tuesday. King Charles and Keir Starmer welcomed the Emir for a state visit to Britain that the Prime Minister hopes will help build on the Gulf states' investment in the country. The Emir took the opportunity to turn the spotlight on the situation in Gaza, saying the tragic images that we see on a daily basis do not do it justice.
I believe that countries like ours, with shared humanitarian values, must stand up in the face of misery and conflict by doing everything within our power to facilitate peace. The past year has brought much success. We reunified children with their families who were separated in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And in our region, from day one of the conflict in Gaza, Qatar acted as a mediator in good faith, alongside our partners, with the aim of stopping the violence, releasing the hostages, and enabling access to much-needed humanitarian aid.
He said both Qatar and the United Kingdom believe that the conflict will not end until a sovereign Palestinian state is established. The Emir said the UK and Qatar were strategic and investment partners, and both were committed to mutual strengthening. Joe Biden pledged lasting United States engagement with Africa as he met his Angolan counterpart João Lourenço in Luanda on Tuesday as part of his first and only visit to sub-Saharan Africa as US President. During brief remarks at the presidential palace, Biden pledged a lasting engagement on Africa's own terms, announcing over $1 billion of new humanitarian support for Africans displaced from home by historic droughts and food insecurity.
The United States continues to be the world's largest provider of humanitarian aid and development assistance. And that's going to increase. You know, that's the right thing for the wealthiest nation in the world to do. And today, I'm announcing over $1 billion in new humanitarian support for Africans displaced from homes by historic droughts and food insecurity.
Biden's trip will also focus on the Lobito Corridor, a partly U.S.-funded railway project aimed at making it easier to export critical minerals from the mining heartlands of Democratic Republic of Congo. Biden visited Angola's National Museum of Slavery to mark the two nations' shared history in the transatlantic slave trade. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is highly unlikely to heed Ukraine's call for a membership invitation at a meeting on Tuesday. According to diplomats, this dashed Kiev's hopes of a political boost as it struggles on the battlefield and awaits United States President-elect Donald Trump's return to the White House. In a letter to his NATO counterparts ahead of the meeting, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said an invitation would remove one of Russia's main arguments for waging its war, namely preventing Ukraine from joining the alliance. Although NATO has stated that Ukraine will join its ranks and its path to membership is irreversible, the alliance has not set a date or issued an invitation. Diplomats said there was currently no consensus among its 32 members to do so. Some analysts and diplomats have suggested Ukraine could receive security guarantees from individual Western countries rather than from NATO as a whole. India and China work towards repairing strained ties. That and more coming up next. India and China will consider other aspects of their bilateral ties in a calibrated manner now that they have completed pulling back their troops from the last two face-off points on their Himalayan border. The comments came 6 weeks after New Delhi and Beijing reached a deal to resolve a 4-year military standoff that had damaged the relationship between the Asian giants. Relations between the world's two most populous nations, both nuclear powers, have been strained since clashes between their troops on the frontier in the Western Himalayas left 20 Indian and 4 Chinese soldiers dead in 2020. India severed direct air links with China, banned hundreds of Chinese mobile applications and added layers of vetting on Chinese investments. Ties stabilized after diplomatic talks and a series of pacts were reached from 1991, and trade and business links boomed until they were disrupted by the clashes in the summer of 2020. Days after the two sides reached a deal in October to end the border conflict, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held their first formal talks in 5 years and agreed to resolve their differences and boost ties. Resuming direct flights and fast-tracking visa approvals are expected to be among the first steps. Total Energies will build a 0.3 gigawatt GW solar park in Saudi Arabia, while EDF Renewables will build 2 solar parks totaling 1.4 GW as part of a series of deals announced on Tuesday during a visit by French President Emmanuel Macron to Riyadh. The French companies entered into 25-year power purchase agreements with the Saudi power procurement company for the projects, which were awarded on a build-own-operate model as part of the kingdom's 5th renewable tender round. Saudi Arabia is aiming to build 130 GW of renewable capacity by 2030, up from less than 5 GW today, with the International Energy Agency estimating the kingdom will be responsible for a third of the growth in renewables for the entire Middle East and North Africa region over the next 5 years. Total Energies has identified the Middle East as a priority location for its future green growth. An agreement between Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund (PIF), wholly owned subsidiary Saudi Investment Recycling Company (SIRC), and Veolia V. The value of the agreements was not disclosed, though Saudi Arabia has previously said the entire 3.7 GW renewable round would attract more than 8 billion Saudi riyals, equivalent to about $2.1 billion US. Venezuela's government is planning a budget worth $22.7 billion US for next year, and the country's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez told lawmakers at the government airline National Assembly on Tuesday that the new budget was up nearly 11% from the 2024 budget of $20.5 billion. She gave no details on expected economic growth or forecasts for inflation. After years of hyperinflation and amid broad U.S. sanctions, in 2022, the administration of President Nicolas Maduro began using orthodox policies, including credit restrictions, lower public spending, a fixed dollar Bolivar rate, and central bank sales of billions of dollars in foreign currency to tamp down consumer prices. Maduro, who will begin his third term in January after a disrupted election that the opposition and international observers say he lost, has said his government defeated inflation of more than 100,000%, and prices in 2024 are similar to those in 2014. However, prices have increased in the final quarter of this year after the government allowed the Bolivar currency to float in mid-October, beginning a depreciation that has seen the Bolivar slide to about 45 versus the dollar, according to central bank figures. A Turkish court jailed pending trial 9 protesters on Tuesday who disrupted President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's speech in Istanbul last week, accusing his government of continuing oil exports to Israel despite a publicized embargo. The incident occurred during Erdogan's televised address at a forum on Friday, where the protesters said the government was failing to uphold its pro-Palestinian rhetoric. Erdogan responded sharply, telling them to not become the mouthpiece of Zionists.
Aynen Siyonistlerin dili ağzı gözü olmak suretiyle burayı ne kadar çalışırsanız çalışın netice alamazsınız.
Police removed the demonstrators from the event and prosecutors charged them with insulting the president and participating in an illegal demonstration. The Istanbul Chief Public Prosecutor's Office said the group had coordinated their actions inside and outside the venue and sought their detention pending trial. The arrests have drawn strong criticism from opposition politicians and rights advocates. Main opposition Republican People's Party CHP leader Özgür Özel denounced the detentions as a blow to democracy. A car explosion early Tuesday near Culiacan and the discovery of 2 dismembered bodies in abandoned boxes on Monday highlight the intensifying internal conflict between the 2 main factions of the Sinaloa cartel in northern Mexico. Authorities responded to a dawn explosion on the outskirts of Culiacan, the capital of Sinaloa state. Mexico's Secretary of Security, Omar Garcia Harfuch, stated that the blast was likely triggered by a drone-like device, although the possibility of a traditional car bomb has been ruled out. The previous day, 2 black boxes containing dismembered remains were found outside the state government building in Culiacan. Sinaloa has been embroiled in a war for the control of Sinaloa cartel since the arrest in July of the legendary drug lord Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Violent confrontations began in September between descendants of El Mayo, known as Los Mayos, and the sons of the cartel co-founder Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Los Chapitos. Before this, July had recorded the highest rate of intentional homicide in the state with 54. In September, 144 intentional homicides were reported. In October, 188, and in November, 175. Over 2,000 Colombian police officers backed by helicopters and sniffer dogs raided prisons nationwide on Tuesday in an operation to combat extortion rackets run out of penitentiaries. Police Chief William Salamanca said that the aim of the operation was to deal a blow to people who are disrupting the peace and coexistence in Colombia from behind bars. The operation, which targeted 11 prisons, began in the early hours at detention centers in the capital Bogota, the northwestern city of Medellin, and western city of Ibagué. Extortion is one of the main sources of income for organized crimes gangs in South America. Troops have been deployed for the past 2 months in neighboring Peru's capital Lima to combat a wave of racketeering by criminal gangs targeting bus drivers, shopkeepers, restaurant owners, and even school teachers. 8 people have been arrested so far in Colombia's prison raids, including 6 guards accused of acting as accomplices. Gang members are accused of holding people to ransom from their jail cells with threatening text messages and phone calls. On the outside, criminal gangs threaten businesses, people and traders with punishment, including death threats, if they do not pay protection money. In Bogota, the authorities say extortion is mainly the work of gangs originating across the border in Venezuela, such as the infamous Tren de Aragua gang, which is also active in the United States. In 2023, at least 9,800 people reported being victims of protection rackets. Next in sports, JDT forced to goalless draw at home against Buriram United.
Bagi melaksanakan misi, mempertahan maruah, mencipta secara setia, perkembangan takkan cinta dengan asalkan membuat peluang untuk segerakan satu perjuangan, satu suara akan yang direncanakan dan dalam memburu takkan keaduan, makan bicara.
Johor Darul Takzim JDT were forced to forget their desire of collecting 3 points at home when they were tied to a goalless draw against Buriram United in the Asian Champions League Elite ACLE match at Sultan Ibrahim Stadium last night. The match between the top clubs from Malaysia and Thailand was so intense that 3 players were sent off the field. The clash, played in rainy conditions from the first minute, saw both teams struggle to organize their attacks towards the goal. The first red card in the 10th minute was for JDT player Murilo Santos when he fouled Dion Cools outside the penalty box. JDT had to play with 10 players but managed to absorb Buriram's pressure and ensure that no goals were conceded. The match, however, was balanced again after Buriram received the same fate with having to play with 10 players. Buriram United captain Tirataum Bun Matan was issued the red card in the 43rd minute after committing a foul outside the game on Arif Aiman Muhammad Hanapi. Meanwhile, the third red card was issued to JDT defender Park Jun Hyung in injury time after fouling Guilherme Campos Bisoli. Both teams were seen to be cautious and more defensive, and the match ended without a goal until the final whistle.
A bad-tempered match draws to a close with no JDT are known for being cocky and play.
Meanwhile, JDT head coach Hector Bidoglio expressed his satisfaction with the performance displayed by his men despite losing the chance to grab 3 maximum points on home ground.
So, in my opinion, JDT today, with 1 player less, play good, play with order. The opponent maybe control the ball, but not control the game. In my opinion. And JDT play as a team, and all the players put the 100%.
Buriram United head coach Osmar Loss also echoed the same response.
We must celebrate this one. Of course, that we plan for 3 points. We know that these points would be important to get the next stage. But I think the game was really emotional for both teams.
Then in Seoul, Pohang Steelers inflicted a first Asian Champions League defeat on treble-chasing Vissel Kobe 3-1 on Tuesday. Japan's Kobe racked up 4 wins and 1 draw from their opening 5 games, but they could not cope with a hungry Pohang side looking to haul themselves into the 8 qualification places in the East table. At Pohang Steel Yard, the home side took the lead in the 13th minute when Han slammed the ball home from close range after Kobe had conceded an indirect free kick for a back pass. Veteran Kim made it 2 less than 10 minutes later when he charged down the right and arrowed in a shot across the goalkeeper. Sasaki pulled one back from the spot after Lee Tae-suk pulled down Rikudo Hiroshi in the box. However, substitute Jung Jae-hee sealed the win through a late third goal for Pohang to secure the win and lift the South Korean side out of the elimination zone in the East table. Kobe, who have already won Japan's domestic Emperor's Cup and could clinch their second straight J-League title this weekend, are still on course for a place in the knockout round. In the West Asia region, Al Hilal downed Qatar's Al Gharafa 3-0 on Tuesday to move to the top of the Western standings in the Asian Champions League. Marcos Leonardo scored the opening goal in the 18th minute when he smashed Yasir Al-Sharani's cutback into the roof of the net. Late strikes from substitutes Alexander Mitrovic and Sergei Milikonovic-Savic added gloss to the Saudi champions' victory. Jorge Jesus' side had already confirmed their qualification for the knockout rounds after last week's draw with Al Sadd, but now move into pole position on goal difference, equal on 16 points with Pro League rivals Al Ahly. The remaining league phase matches will be played in February, with the round of 16 to be held in March. The quarterfinals, semi-finals and finals will be held on a centralized basis in Saudi Arabia in late April and early May. Struggling Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola is confident that he could count on support by fans despite strings of poor performances. The club's sudden downturn in form has led to serious questions over their ability to challenge for the silverware for the first time in years.
I said it before, cannot talk of the results we had in the past to think about in the big targets will be a big mistake. The mistake is try to win a team that's close to us, to take advantage of him, to be close in the top 4, and that is the target. After, in November, we'll see what happens, but of course it's going to happen. We will try to win games. That's what you have to try to do.
Guardiola said his side could no longer entertain lofty aspirations of lifting the league title at the end of the season and would have to instead focus on adopting a step-by-step approaches as they look to return to the top 4. Defending champion City have 23 points from 13 matches, 11 adrift of leaders Liverpool, but only 2 behind second place Arsenal and Chelsea in third. City, who have won 6 of the last 7 Premier League titles, are without a win in 7 games in all competitions. City's woes could worsen as they faced a Forest side who have punched above their weight and sit 6, a point behind City. Still on the English Premier League, Chelsea's players have been able to implement Enzo Maresca's style of play quicker than the Italian manager expected. But he said on Tuesday that the team is still had room for improvement ahead of a Premier League game against Southampton. Chelsea are third in the standings with 25 points from 13 games, level with second place Arsenal and 9 points behind leaders Liverpool.
For sure, I still consider a big job, as you said, but this doesn't mean that because it's a big job, you are not thinking to do the right things. In terms of expectation, we are ahead of my expectation in the way we are playing, and for sure in terms of results. We start 4 or 5 months ago. It's very early, short time together, but the best feeling that I have is that there are many things that we can do better, and we are in the right direction.
And that wraps up World Today this time around. In our top story, South Korean martial law lifted. President Yoon Suk-yeol called to step down. I'm Renee Fong. Malaysia Madani. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thanks for watching and have a pleasant afternoon.